Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's campus conversation. I'm Sharon Martin, Vice President for University Relations and Enrollment Management, and thank you for joining us today, both here in person and watching via live stream. Today's conversation will discuss House Bill 2519, otherwise known as Campus Carry. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. The presentation you're about to see is online at bureaucracybusters.wvu.edu. You'll be able to reference the presentation after this session. Also at that site, you will find an FAQ sheet as well as other presentations that have been recorded previously on this topic. If you are watching online, you can still send questions to us at campusconversations@mail.wvu.edu. We will monitor those and make sure your questions are asked. So what we're going to do today is we will start with a presentation. We're going to discuss how we are keeping our campuses safe, provide a background information and a national perspective, discuss current West Virginia law and university policies, discuss the 2018 Self-Defense Act, and the House Bill 2519 overview. How today will work is a typical campus conversation. We're going to hear first from Rob Allsop, who is our Vice President for Strategic Initiatives. And then also joining us today is Dr. Clay Marsh, our Vice President and Executive Dean for Health Sciences. So after the presentations, we'll open it up to a question and answer. At this point, you'll see there are two mics in the room. We'll ask that you go to those mics so that everyone can hear your question. But let's begin the conversation by welcoming Rob Allsop.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can everybody hear me? Thanks for coming out today to have a conversation. So I wanted to start just with a few comments generally. West Virginia is my home. My family moved here about 5 years ago to come to come to Morgantown. My wife got a job and I followed. And quickly got a job, first opportunity to work for the university. It's our home. I've got 3 young ones that are here and going through our public school system. I want our community to be safe, and I want our university to be safe. And so we all are working towards that goal. And there's a lot of areas on our campus where we do have a culture, I think, of safety and working together as to who we want to be. And so whether that's the 58 strong of our university police department who are around and about working to keep us safe, our Title IX office. And so, one of the things we've talked about a few years ago, we weren't doing as much as we should have been. And so we invested and hired investigators and educators and are doing more every day for Title IX because we don't want sexual assault to occur on our campus. And we want to be robust and leaders in those areas. We have our talent and culture unit who works every day to make sure that our employees feel safe and work through those issues. And then, we have folks like from environmental health and safety who work every day to make sure our labs and our buildings are safe from that perspective. And on that note, before I start, I do want to say, the campus carry legislation has been introduced for about 4 years in a row now. I can tell you that since it was introduced, President Gee, Provost McConnell, First Chief Roberts, W.P. Chidester, myself, my government relations team, and others have been talking with folks about the concerns that we have, the concerns we believe our community has about this type of legislation. Each year we've spoken with the Speaker, the President, Democrats, Republicans, House, Senate about this legislation and expressing our concerns. I think as the Provost has indicated, we were the only ones who testified at the hearing last year. We led a letter of presidents in years past stating our concerns with this legislation. And so we have been active in engaging not only with members of the legislature and those who support this types of legislation, but here on our campus with faculty, students, and our Board of Governors moving forward. So we'll talk a little bit more specifically about that. This has been an iterative process over a few years where we've really been engaged in trying to, again, make sure that we do everything we can for our campus. So just quickly, current West Virginia law. On our campus, we're just like any other private property owner. We can develop a policy relating to weapons on campus, and we do. I'll talk about that policy here in a minute. But as a matter of state law, we have the ability to tell someone to leave. And if they leave, it's no problem. If they don't, they can be guilty of criminal trespass. Except for cars in parking lots. And I'll talk about this here in a little bit. But Last year, the legislature overwhelmingly passed a piece of legislation that said that someone could store a firearm locked away in a car in a parking lot, even on someone's private property. And so Walmart, for example, their private property, even if they wanted to say, no, I don't want any guns in the parking lot, the legislature and the supporters of the Second Amendment said, well, that thwarts the right to carry. And so now individuals do have that right, even on our parking lots today. And we can take action against faculty, students, and staff who violate our policy. And again, that policy is in and available on our website. There are some exemptions: law enforcement officers, the Mountaineer, corrections, those who have a prosecutorial or judicial role. And then there are certain exceptions for if someone is under threat that they could be able to carry in a concealed basis. So a little bit of background. I mentioned the parking lot bill, but just going back a couple of steps. It used to be in West Virginia that to get a permit, or to carry a concealed weapon, we're not an open carry state, we are a concealed carry state, but to carry on a concealed basis, an individual had to get a license. 2 years ago, advocates in the legislature and those supporting expanded rights under the Second Amendment and the applicable West Virginia constitutional provision got the legislature to pass what they called constitutional carry. And so now in West Virginia, if you want to carry a concealed weapon, you do not have to get a permit to do so. You can do so in our state. You can't come on someone else's property. So if someone walks on our property without that license, we can tell them to leave. But in the common areas of the state's roads, highways, on the public streets, you have what they call a constitutional right to carry. Again, 2 years later, the parking lot bill was passed. One thing I do want to mention, the Chamber of Commerce, the Manufacturing Association, the Business and Industry Council opposed the parking lot bill. It was passed over their opposition with broad support in the legislature. The constitutional carry bill was passed over the opposition of every law enforcement organization in the state, again, with wide margins moving forward. There is a significant amount of support in the legislature for expansive views of and protections for gun rights in our state. Campus carry, as is everybody's aware now, has become the #1 priority for the National Rifle Association and the West Virginia Citizens Defense League. The issue came close to moving forward in 2008 through House Bill 4298, the Campus Self-Defense Act. Before I delve into the issue, one of the things that we've been researching is to look at what's the national perspective. So there are 11 states right now where campus carry is mandated. Recent examples: Arkansas, Texas, Georgia, and Kansas are 4 states that have actually gone through a campus carry legislation within the past 5 years. Other states have had it for a longer period of time. Campus carry is banned in 20 states, and so the other 19 are just like West Virginia. It's up to the individual institution as to whether to permit weapons on a campus and how to do that. We have spoken with general counsels at the University of Texas, the University of Georgia, folks in Kansas, their government relations officials, as to how they dealt with the legislature and how they went through an implementation to make sure that their campus could be safe moving forward. And I'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about the exemptions that are currently in the bill. If 2519 would become the law as introduced, we would become the 12th state to mandate campus carry. We'd be the 4th to allow 18-year-old permit holders to carry concealed weapon firearms on campus. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. 5th state to allow concealed weapons in university housing, or at least in the common areas of university housing. Most states that have passed campus carry laws have recognized many places of the campus are sensitive that are justifiable common sense limitations on permitting firearms. So 2018, the Campus Carry Act. This was a year ago. So the advocates of this bill introduced this bill, and it said that if you had a concealed weapon permit, either a provisional or a full-time license, then you had the right to carry on our campus moving forward. And there were only 3 areas that would be excluded from that right of someone who had a concealed weapon license. And those are stadiums or arenas, as you can see, with a capacity of more than 5,000 spectators, a daycare facility, or the secure area of any building used by law enforcement. The bill passed the House Education Committee and was in the House Judiciary Committee last year. And the House Judiciary Chairman had both the parking lot bill and the campus carry bill the NRA and supporters wanting both pieces of legislation. I'll tell you, because I was in his office arguing over it. With the teacher strike, he sat the NRA down and said, I don't have time to run two bills. I'm not running campus carry. I'm opposed to it, but the parking lot bill will be on the agenda. I will tell you in candor, he looked at both of us, and he particularly looked at me and said, there is mammoth support for the Campus Self-Defense Act in the legislature, and you need to do your homework because it's probably going to come back next year as to because of the amount of support that it has in the legislature. And so we've done a lot of research. We've talked with our faculty senate. We have looked at the sandbox in which and the ground rules for the support in the legislature for this bill. So moving forward from 2018 to 2019, the Campus Carry Self-Defense Act was introduced again in the legislature. The sponsors of the bill indicated that they were going to run it and that it was going to move forward, but they also indicated that they were willing to consider areas of the campus that were particularly sensitive or areas that other states had considered as exemptions. And so we, knowing the support the bill had and what we'd been admonished by the leadership in both of the houses of the legislature, came up with a list based on what we had researched and what we'd come up on campus of if campus carry is going to run, what are the potential exemptions from our campus? Not everything that we brought up as a concern, the sponsors were willing to tolerate. And so we asked for a long and broad list of exemptions that we thought for sensitive areas that we wanted to protect. As of now, in the bill that passed the House of Delegates last night, there are the following exemptions. Venues or arenas with a capacity of more than 1,000 spectators. So that would cover all of our athletic venues, the Shell Building, as well as the performance venue and the Creative Arts Center. Daycare facilities, places where university police departments are located. Areas where the university has implemented adequate security measures. So for example, Fall Fest, even though it's not technically an arena or a venue, what we usually do is to get into that event, you have to have a wristband and go through security. We would be able to limit even concealed weapon holders from carrying a weapon into an event like that. Disciplinary hearings, areas that are used exclusively by K-12 or private entities. And so if there is a K through 12 event on our campus, we can declare that area off limits and no weapons in that area. Areas that are prohibited by state and federal law, individual offices, laboratories. Now, laboratories are defined as high hazard laboratories, so it's not all of our sort of biology labs, but there's a broad list that was actually developed by the University of Texas that if there are dangerous chemicals or any of our animal labs, any of those areas are off limits. Counseling and patient treatment areas are excluded from the legislation, so we will be able to prohibit weapons at all times from anyone in those areas, as along with these. Residence halls, except for common areas in residence halls. And then the sponsors or advocates of the bill proposed an effective date of July 1, 2020, so that if it passes, we would have an opportunity to educate, communicate, and determine where those exempt areas would be and how we would make sure that we keep our campus safe. One thing that is not explicit here, but I did want to say, is any area that we lease to a third party, even though we own the property, would not be subject to this exemption. So the hospital and any of the areas, the hospital itself, which is leased to the hospital, and any areas of the health science center that are leased to the hospital would not be subject to this limitation on the Board of Governors moving forward. There's also provisions in the bill that say that any individual without a permit, they cannot intentionally or knowingly display their firearm, so they have to keep it concealed. If they don't, all of the rules that we have as far as discipline or other action would apply. We do have immunity for any incidents if there's an accidental discharge. Again, we retain full authority for non-license holders in exempted areas. And we do have the ability, as I said, to secure particular events on campus. So one question you may have relates to, well, who can get a license? And so there are two types of license in West Virginia. There's a provisional permit, which is for 18 to 20-year-olds, and then there's a full permit, which is for 21 and over. One of the key distinctions, just to start out with, is we do have reciprocity with other states. So if a state has a concealed weapon license and the requirements for that state are at least as stringent as West Virginia's, then we recognize that concealed weapon permit. There is no such reciprocity for 18 to 20-year-olds. So the only 18 to 20-year-olds that can get a permit in West Virginia are those who are West Virginia residents and who go through the checks that I'm going to talk about. So they have to go through a nationwide criminal background check. They cannot have been within the immediate preceding 3 years, been in a residential or court-ordered treatment for alcoholism, or 2 or more convictions for driving while impaired. They can't have been convicted of a felony or of a misdemeanor within the previous, 5 years, unless it's a domestic violence related misdemeanor, in which that case it is a lifetime ban. You cannot get a license. You can't be under indictment for a felony offense or adjudicated mentally incompetent or otherwise be prohibited from state or federal law from possessing or receiving a firearm. As I indicated, we have been in Charleston trying to understand what I'll call the art of the possible, expressing our concerns as it relates to the legislation. I will say that there are those on campus who are adamantly opposed and very apprehensive about this legislation. There are those on campus who are supportive of this legislation. And so our responsibility from President Gee and Provost McConnell, Clay, and me in leading the government relations effort is to try to understand what's the art of the possible and advise our campus leaders to try to get the best result for us on how to keep our campus safe moving forward. And so if this bill doesn't pass, we're going to continue to do that every day. And if this bill does pass, we're going to educate, we're going to communicate, and we're going to do what we need to do to make sure that we have as welcoming and a safe environment for our faculty, students, and staff that we possibly can. So I think with that, I'll turn it back over to Sharon and ask Clay to come up for questions.
Great. Yep. Clay will join us. What we're going to do is start with some questions. Again, like I mentioned before, if you have one, please go to the microphone so that folks can hear us who are watching via live stream. All right. We'll start here to my left. Okay.
So Rob, I appreciate, can you guys hear me okay? So Rob, I appreciate you being out here. And I just want to say that I know a lot of people are very scared right now, and scared not only because of, the potential for a change related to this bill, but also just the fear of change, of the unknown. And while personally, I would not, sorry? Okay, let me finish what I would like to say, because I just want to share my own personal position, which I would prefer us to keep the ability to make the rules ourselves, and certainly, but I'm also a citizen of this country and state, and I will abide with the decisions of the representative, the legislators who represent the citizens of the state. But whether or not this bill passes, it is really up to us to create the culture and the community that we want to live in. And many people have lots of concerns, and we want you to voice those concerns. So we want to hear your voices, but not only in this particular circumstance, but is really up to us to create the place that we want to live, the community, the environment, the culture. And I would say that Rob, me, Sharon, Gordon, Joyce, everybody at this university is compelled and committed to make this a great place to be. And that is irrespective of this bill or others. And I know that we will still have the control to do that, no matter what happens with this bill. But at the same time, we need to come together in a way where we do control the environment in which we live. And we had another town hall maybe a year or two ago where we talked about the immigration policies. And many people were very upset about that. And we met with a number of students and folks that were affected by that. But I think as a university community and as a health science campus, we came together and people feel safe still here. And I will commit to you that we will do the same with this bill, no matter what happens with it. So I will join you guys in wanting to make sure that we hear your voice, that we invite that, but not only now, forever, for each day, but that we really do hold the power here to create the environment that we want to live in and how we want to treat each other every day. And that should not be affected at all by this bill. So that's my statement.
Great. Thank you, Clay. We'll start here on my left.
Thanks, Clay. Thanks, Rob, for being here. I mean, as Clay mentioned, I, regardless of whether I support a gun ownership or oppose it, I think there is some pragmatic and technical problems associated with this bill if it passes with respect to its implementation, number one. Number two, economical support behind it to enforce it. I mean, with all the exceptions that you had listed of areas that are sanctioned for carrying a concealed weapon, how would you propose, if this bill is passed, that we will be able to protect those areas? Because clearly there are some gray zone in those areas where you think it is a lab, it's a simple lab, it's not a high hazard, but could be potentially labeled as an area where we see patients for our research purposes and so forth. So it would be really a very tough thing to define it on the front end as to these places are sanctioned versus areas where you can actually carry the weapon. So that's number one. How do we really identify those targeted areas and protect them? And number two, how do we economically feel that we have the resources to enforce the rules?
So really good question. A lot of the exemptions that are in this legislation are tailored after policies at the University of Texas. Not all, but a number of them. The laboratory provision that is in the legislation right now is actually broader than what the University of Texas did. So a couple of things. One, we will have, as those other states did, a number of communications and education to identify the areas of campus that are off limits. The second thing I will say is it is on the obligation of a student to know that. And so it may be signage, but it may be not. It may be areas that we do, and if someone violates those rules, then we'll take action against them. But it'll be an educational process that'll take the better course of a year to walk through those examples. There may be some increased security that we have to do in some of those areas that we want to do. We may post signage. That's one of the things we actually want to engage the campus on. I can tell you in a couple of those other states, Texas in particular, they went through a long, exhaustive process. You can actually go on Texas's website right now and actually pull up and go by building and see what areas are off limits and what areas are not as it relates to the lab question. And so we will work with our campus, with our leaders, to go through that process to communicate about it. Moving forward, we did ask the legislature for additional revenues, appropriations for this year, not only for this bill if it passed, but in general, we have asked for additional support for that. But safety is a priority. So whether it was the increase we did for the Title IX budget a few years ago, or what we need to do for this if this bill passes, we will work to adopt what we think are reasonable for our campus.
I would also just say that if this does move forward, then we would also invite you guys, if you have thoughts, concerns about particular areas where you say, oh, this is not a protected area, but it really should be because of whatever, we will have very quick, easy pathways to get back to us, to get back to our law enforcement, so that you guys continue to have the voice as well from what you're seeing and what you're feeling, to make sure that we are understanding things to the best level that we can.
Great. Next question.
My name is Jim Horner, and I do have a cold, so I apologize for my voice. I've been here since 1972, and I was actually an undergraduate here. So I have a lot of experience on this campus. I was mainly downtown, but I was heavily involved in health sciences generally, and also the Cancer Center. And I'd like to address this to legislatures, but I'd like you to comment on this. I was a department chair for 17 years. It was not easy to recruit faculty. And part of the reason it wasn't easy to recruit faculty is we didn't pay as well as our peers in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Virginia and so forth. And so that made it difficult. But it also made it difficult because the image of the state isn't always what we have a great image of the state, but outsiders often don't. And part of the reason they don't is because the legislature often does things that kind of shoot the state in the foot. This is one of those things. If in fact this passes, I think it will be much more difficult for us to recruit high qualified faculty. And this is what I want you to comment on, because I had trouble, under normal circumstances. Now I think it will be much more difficult. If I were a young PhD, I would not consider the states that allow campus carry. I do not want to be in front of a classroom when I don't know who in front of me has a gun. It's not just a question of I'm a statistician. Some perhaps you say, well, that's not so controversial, and that's mainly true. Maybe for some of you it's controversial, but at any rate, what I'm saying is that there are many people like me, I think, out there that you won't even know who doesn't apply because they simply won't. And among those do apply, when they find out that we're a campus carry state, that may be it. Now, some may come, that's fine, but I think it's going to be much harder to recruit. I certainly would not have considered this as an option for employment under the current circumstances if I were a young PhD. And I want to address that to the legislatures to think carefully about. And I'd like your comments on this.
So we do share those concerns. We have shared those concerns with the presiding officers of both houses of the legislature, with members of the committees. It's one of the reasons why we argued that classrooms, carte blanche, should be exempt from this bill. It's one of the reasons why we said individual offices got to be exempt from this bill. So let me just address that. So let me just address that. And the question was, why would you even sit down and talk with someone about this? Why wouldn't you just fight it to the end? And it's a very good question and something that I have struggled with. I don't know if you saw the events yesterday, but the presiding officer of the House, the Speaker of the House of Delegates, is opposed to this legislation. The Judiciary Chairman is opposed to this legislation. The Judiciary Chairman told me that he was not going to run it unless he had to. He called me and said, if I don't run this bill, they're going to discharge it from this committee and there will be no exemptions in it. The Speaker of the House called me and said, I am doing everything. And he is a WVU grad. He is a PhD from here. He worked at Extension here. He loves this university. He called me and said, I've done all I can. I am a no vote, but the support in this bill is so overwhelming that it is going to pass. And they have the votes to consider whatever exemption that they want or not, as was evidenced on the floor of the House last night when they beat back 15 amendments. And so do we prefer local control in this bill? Absolutely. Personally, and I'll just say this, and I know this is the way President Gee feels and Clay feels and Joyce feels, I think it is a tragedy that after Aurora and Parkland and Sandy Hook and all those things, that we haven't taken the steps to get AK-47s and help for mental health people so that we don't have situations like that occur again. It's not the same as someone who has a concealed weapon license and carries a pistol or revolver on this campus, but there are real issues that we've got to address on guns. But my job, however, at the university, no matter how painful it is to me or to the president, is to look at where the votes are in the legislature. And if I could tell you that the blue and gold could come and they could just wave a magic wand and this bill would go away, I would probably recommend that. We have talked to legislators about this issue. The Chamber of Commerce and the Business and Industry Council, who support Republican candidates heavily, had an issue with the parking lot bill. And they said Bear Chemical is in the Chemical Valley. It is. It's in Charleston. If there is an accidental discharge from a weapon in that parking lot and it goes the wrong way and it hits the wrong tank, you're talking about a massive disaster in Charleston. In the House Judiciary Committee last week, there were 25 members of that committee. Only 6 voted for that exemption. And so what I am saying is, when we're faced with those set of facts and those who support this bill want to move forward on it, and if you saw the debate last night, there are a lot of people who feel very passionate about this. I'll just tell you a story before I get to the ultimate point. One of those leading legislators has a daughter, and he said, I carry just about everywhere I can. My daughter carries. She's a freshman in college. I am scared to death that when she's walking from her car to her dorm room at night, something's going to happen to her, and I want her to have the right to protect herself. And there are a lot of folks in the legislature who believe that. And so there are people on this campus who believe that. And so, yes, if I thought it was in our best interest to recommend to the president, we can defeat this legislation easy, let's go do it, I would make the recommendation and let the campus leadership make that decision. What we have said is we prefer local control. And they've said, that's very nice, but we've got the votes and we're moving forward. Are there areas of the campus that are sensitive that you want to protect? We thought, you know what? We've got to try to get some of these exemptions in if this bill's going to go. So that's why we went after individual offices. We went after classrooms. We went after all of those areas. You know what? I know it's not, some of you like it, some of you don't. What I will tell you is when we've talked to the folks at the University of Texas and the University of Kansas and Georgia and Arkansas, there are some challenges that you have to deal with. But life has gone on at those campuses. And yes, it will be harder to recruit some faculty. I will have some friends, I'm no doubt, who will probably think, you know what, I'm going to leave. What I can say is if this bill passes, it may not, but if this bill passes, give me, give Clay, give Gordon, give Sharon, give Joyce the opportunity, give our UPD the opportunity to convince you that we can still be a safe campus. Because I believe on everything that we've heard and seen in the exemptions in this bill, that we've got a good chance of doing that. There's no guarantees on it, but that's sort of the reality of where we are and where we need to go as a university. As I've said at a previous conversation, then I know we want to get more questions. Elections have consequences. There are a number of folks who really support the Second Amendment in the House of Delegates on this bill, and that is a reality of where we are.
Hey, Rob, just mention, and you kind of did, but be direct about if we opposed it and the bill went forward, what would happen to, what would the exemptions be in the bill without negotiating related to what you've done?
Well, I mean, so the
I think the point for me, and please, that's good. We want you guys to talk, but is the fact that at the university level, I know Rob will do the very best job to try to make sure that we're as safe as we can be. And while we may have a different preference at the university, we want to make sure that we are reading legislation and adding as many protections as we possibly can to legislations that will go forward.
Thank you for your answer. I just want to say that I think it will greatly hurt the reputation of this university. There will be a lot of people that will not want to come here, not just faculty, but also students, and you will not be safer by this bill. The legislatures need to realize this. There's too much fear in this country now. This is just adding more fear to many of us who would have to stand in front of a classroom and not know who in front of us has a gun. That's just not acceptable to me, and I think some faculty will leave. And so I appreciate what you're doing. I understand why you compromise. It's certainly better than what they might do otherwise. But this madness has to stop. This country is just out of kilter with Europe and other countries in terms of the safety of our citizens in terms of gun deaths. This madness has to stop.
Yeah, we appreciate your voice and appreciate your passion.
So we're going to move on to the next question. I would ask that if you do have comments and feedback, that you do go to the microphones and do try to keep it to a question so that we can keep the conversation moving. We'll go to my left.
Hi, so I'm a native West Virginian and I'm a PhD student here. And I'm not adamantly opposed to guns, but I'm also a graduate teaching assistant. And I feel like it's my role to protect my students in my room. And I know that our students of color, LGBTQIA students, international students, all of these students are ones that experience gun violence the most, and it's them that I'm the most concerned about. And so I feel like I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't stand up and say, I'm opposed to this legislation for that, and I hope that you carry that to the legislature. And I hope that we could get some support and leadership in saying that very same thing. I appreciate you being down at the legislature and sharing our concerns, but it makes me fearful. And I don't want to, and this is the thing that I hate most, is that right now it's in the legislature. We're coming up to, when it's time to vote, we're coming up to elections, and I feel like it's very divisive. I don't want to be concerned about not being able to have a real meaningful conversation about this with my neighbor who may have a different opinion. What I don't understand, no, I understand it very well. It seems like what I heard when I was listening to the legislative debate last night was that all of the institutions of higher education were adamantly opposed to this bill, yet it's continuing to be moved. And it seems like those that are impacted the most are the ones that should be involved from the beginning of how this bill is crafted and moved forward, so that the ones that are most impacted can have the most voice. So I guess my question is about, I don't think I have a question. I think I just would like to convey
So-
that.
So thank you for your statement, but I am going to connect it to a question that we received online, and that is, why didn't administration ask faculty and staff in a timely manner on this important bill, which I know, Rob, you addressed before and perhaps can address again?
Sure. So we have engaged with faculty leadership, student government leadership, staff leadership. Last year during the session of the legislature, the Faculty Senate adopted a resolution opposing campus carry. They did the same this session. Student Government Association actually last year declined to take a position on it because they were split down the middle. This year they did oppose. Staff Council has opposed. We were at Faculty Senate, I believe, back in a couple of times last year. We've been to Faculty Senate Exec Committee. We've had campus conversations. We had notices to campus last year and did some videos. So you can always communicate more. We are committed, whether this bill passes or not, to continue to communicate. But we have been engaging with your elected leaders and university leadership for quite some time on this legislation, as the threat for it passing became a lot more real, actually about a year ago this time.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're going to go to the question to my right.
I have a question in terms of administration's position in support or opposition to the bill. What's this position? Was it clearly expressed through the legislation?
So was our position clearly articulated to the legislature?
And
Yes.
what is the position?
Yes, I mean, so our position, so we've done a couple things. One, we've expressed concerns about the legislation. We've indicated that our preference is local control, and we do not support initiatives like this. What we've also said is, if it's going to move, you've got to have some of the exemptions in it so we can protect as many of the sensitive areas on our campus as is possible. And so, yes, we have been communicating. I can tell you, President Gee has been in the leadership offices of the speaker, the president, the judiciary chairs, the education chairs, the finance chairs. We have been in Charleston often expressing the concerns that we have.
This
And
does not sound like a clear opposition to the bill.
Written document, we can check online.
Sure, there actually is. There's an FAQ that has the position of the university that's been online and posted in e-news and on our Under the Dome that's been there for quite some time, yes.
This position is not clear opposition to the bill, and Representative Householder actually said on the Senate floor that WVU is supporting the bill. Is this the case?
No, so WVU is not supporting the legislation, and
So-
there have been, so what our position is, we prefer local control. We prefer that our Board of Governors have the exact same policy authority that they have right now. The advocates of the bill have said, well, that's very nice.
Yeah,
But-
we
So
heard this multiple
you've
times.
asked
I
for me to
understand
clearly articulate the position of the university. Our preference is local control. what we've said is, if the bill moves, we've got to have as many of these exemptions as we have. That is the position of the university that we've been articulating. We've been articulating our concerns for quite some time, but that is our position. Let me just answer your question about delegate householder. So the great thing about WVU and our president is everybody likes to have the support of the university. We were called last year to take a position on expanding use of marijuana in this state. We've been called to say, can you please weigh in on charter schools? Can you please weigh in on any subject? We have said our position. There are those who want us to oppose the bill who've said, well, that means WVU opposes. There are those who latch onto the exemption part and say, well, that means WVU has agreed to the bill. And so we can't control everybody who speaks and interprets what we've said,
Yeah,
but our
you-
position has been pretty clear as to what we believe and but the understanding the sandbox that we're playing in.
But your belief is pretty stretchy. I did not hear strong opposition to the bill. And that's why the legislature thinks WVU supports it, unlike any other educational institution in the state. And that, I think, is a failure.
I understand your point.
Move to my left, and then we'll take a question that's come in via email, but we'll move to my left first.
I think that question is partially what I was also going to ask, but I have more to say about it. And that is, I think we're treating the bill as a foregone conclusion. I think the university has been for quite some time. And I very much respect the amount of effort that has gone into deliberations in Charleston that you all have done on our behalf. But I think what we saw this week was a group of organized faculty and graduate students who went to the Capitol and who organized from campus and who moved the dial. And we saw it in the vote last night. And I know some of those people are in this room. And I talked to a lot of students this week. I know there are people on this campus who support the bill. I believe there are more who don't. And I want to know what would have gone a long way this week is for our delegates to have had clarification. It wasn't just householder. We heard a lot of confusion directly from the delegates. So some clarification on the stance of the university would have gone a long way. What would have gone a long way, or what will go a long way with the Senate, and my direct question for you is, what will you do to support this community in voicing our opinion on the bill? And I have some specific ideas. Will you provide charter buses for us to go to the Capitol to express our opinion, whatever that might be? Will you give us a free speech day so that we can go without consequences for our jobs? And will you find other direct ways to support your community whose voices you want to hear now, before the bill passes, so that we are visible, we are present, and whatever our opinions are made known to our legislators?
So we absolutely 100%, whether you are opposed, support, neutral, adamantly opposed, apprehensive, you are right to express your grievances to your government, and there will be no repercussions for any faculty, staff, or student who takes a position as it relates to whether they think that the campus carry bill should pass or whether it should fail. We have been adamant about that. We have sent out information to supervisors indicating if someone wants to take annual leave or they want to go to Charleston to speak either for or oppose that bill, that folks are to bend over backwards to allow individuals to have the opportunity to go to campus. In response to questions, we have indicated, faculty or those who are teaching in classrooms, you're the ones who have the discretion as to how you get your coursework completed during the semester and when you have those courses. And so you have the discretion as to whether you're going to have a class on a particular day or whether you're going to take your advocacy to Charleston. So all of those questions as to what we have always supported and will always support is the rights of our employees and our students to express their opinion on whatever the subject of the day is, as we always do in a responsible and thoughtful manner moving forward. And that includes on this legislation. As it relates to I do not believe we ever have sent or paid for charter buses to go down to Charleston on that front. I don't know about that one, but I will check. I don't know that we've gone there on positions or want to set the precedent for other opportunities like that. But we absolutely support our folks who want to express their grievances to their government on this issue.
So I'm going to interject with a question via email. If we struggle with preventing students from bringing alcohol into residence halls, how can we prevent guns in them?
It's a really good question. So it's current policy that no one's allowed to bring a gun in dorm. As you'll notice, we don't have metal detectors. We don't have security guards with wands as to any of our residence halls right now. And so can I tell you for 100% certain that a student doesn't have a weapon concealed or a faculty member doesn't have a weapon concealed on their person or in their residence hall? I mean, I'm not naive enough to think that of the 25,000 students and the 7,000 full-time employees, that there aren't people who are not obeying university policy. And so can I give anyone that guarantee that there's someone that's not there? I can't. I will tell you that I think most people obey the policies and they listen and they are respectful of what we are as a university community. And so I expect, and we have police who enforce that and work through that. Whatever these news rules are, we'll do the same thing. A lot of folks in our community are responsible. Same thing with our students. We're also cognizant and sensitive that we may have to have UPD doing more. We may have to have more security around campus in certain places, and we'll be thoughtful as we work through that.
Great.
And I would also just say briefly that if you see something, you should report it. I mean, so you guys are the eyes and ears as well of our ability to make sure that people are compliant with the rules that we all have agreed to.
Very good point. To my right, microphone.
My name is Jay Martello. I've been here 10 years. I'm with the School of Pharmacy, and I don't live in West Virginia. I actually live in Pennsylvania, but I've been here, as I said, for a while. And I can state from personal experience that for the last 4 years, I've been concerned that there was a student that would come in and possibly take vengeance upon myself and other faculty for an issue that we had at our school. And that's something that I'm still kind of living with. But that could happen without this bill being passed. But I'm a scientist. I'm trying to be objective here. And as I've kind of looked into this, I can't really think of any good, legitimate, scientific, evidence-based reason to try to push this thing. And what does it add? What does it do? And I don't know if you have any insight into that, because to me, it doesn't make much sense as a scientist why this would be pushed through.
So do not take this as my position or advocate. I'll tell you what we've heard from supporters of this legislation. And it kind of goes back to the delegate who had a daughter who wanted to carry on campus. What the advocates of this legislation would say is take Virginia Tech. And we actually had an email a couple of weeks ago on this very point. Gentleman said, I was in the military for 15 years. I was trained as a marksman. I was in one of the buildings at Virginia Tech. I was not allowed to carry a weapon, and so I didn't. Had I been able to carry on that day, I'm not saying he would have or wouldn't have. I'm just telling you what he reported to me in an email. I can guarantee you when I heard those gunshots in that building, I would have taken action. And there are a lot of folks who are familiar with guns who believe that if they are in that position, they would be there. And what they would also say, and I think, so let me say this. After Virginia Tech, our campus, I wasn't here, but I know our campus sat down and had a conversation. Are we going to put metal detectors? And I think this goes to some of what Clay's talks about of what we want to be as an institution. We could have put metal detectors in every building, at every classroom. We could have tripled the number of security that we had, and we could have done all that. I think as a university community, what we talked about was engagement. We talked about response times with our UPD. We talked about training. We have active shooter training all here constantly on our campus. We'll continue to do that. But we didn't decide as an institution that we were going to make students and faculty go through that, even though one of our sister campuses has just been through that tragedy. And so what the supporters of legislation like this would say is, we respect that opinion, but if I have a weapon and I want to protect my own person and you're not going to do those things, then I ought to have the ability to protect myself. And so for them, what I have consistently heard, it's not about quenching free speech rights. It's not about infringing upon academic freedom, although I know that's a legitimate concern that we have to worry about and for our own personal safety. But what they would say is, I want to be able to protect myself because there are those who could get access to a weapon and do harm to me, and I want to be able to protect myself. That's what a lot of folks who support this legislation believe, is if they're in that room when something bad happens and there's not any UPD there because we can't be everywhere, they can do something to protect. Now, so again, I'm not. I was not advocating that as my position. I was just responding the question as to what the advocates of the legislation have said. I can tell you in response, our UPD will say, if we're going into a situation, those who have a gun or are trying to do good are not wearing a white hat, and those who are trying to do harm do not wear a black hat, and it is going to make the situation more difficult for our UPD. And we have expressed those concerns to the legislature. And so I'm not advocating that position, but that's what the advocates of this legislation have to say.
Thank you for your response. And I kind of get where that's coming from. It's just trying to be objective here. That's just kind of my thing. I don't know if there's really a good solid reason other than feelings pushing this through. And that's where I get hung up on as a scientist. And I'm sure other people here on this Health Sciences Center feel the same way.
I would just say, I don't think there is that data. So
To my left.
I have a question, but it's kind of interactive question, so I would like audience to participate as well. I just want to make clear it's not only my personal statement, but most of my colleagues who are educators, professors here on this campus. This bill is not about Second Amendment. This bill is not about your rights to carry a gun. You can have them. You're free. You have a legitimate right to have them. And it's not about freedom of expression, or I want to show that I have it, but it's about education. This is university, and we're here to teach and to bring the best and brightest to you guys, to make West Virginia the strongest and the best state. And I'm here 12 years, and I've really grown into the state, and I really love to have that state to really be the best. So now in this audience, we have everybody presented for and against guns, but I would love you guys who are for guns, and I really respect your right here, to raise your hands and say, I am for that legislature to be passed. Can you please raise your hands? Awesome. So now it's for this legislation to be passed. Now I would like to raise those of you who actually educate people in a classroom, who are professors here. How many of you are for carry on? I mean, for carry on, and you professor. You are for carry on to be approved, to get through, but you are professor in this university or teach in a classroom curriculum. So this is my response to you guys. I understand and I respect you, but you need to respect us too. We are majority here. We bringing your kids or kids of your friends a knowledge, profession, and a brighter future. And let us be safe in this environment.
Do
That's it.
you have a question
No.
as well? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have a question?
Yes. I
Thank
do.
you. All right. Please go
Betsy
ahead.
Ellswick, Associate Professor, School of Pharmacy, speaking on behalf of myself, but I think sharing the views of a lot of folks in this room. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been teaching a course on policy and advocacy. I go to Charleston multiple times a year, and DC at least once a year, to speak on issues related to healthcare. What I'm hearing, as I hear with a lot of issues, is a lot of emotion and a lot of passion, maybe some fear, but I think it goes beyond that. I have a question, but I'm going to share something because I've learned some stuff over the years. And one is never, ever assume something. And we know what that does. Our first grade teacher told us. I'm not going to assume this bill is going to pass because I've worked on bills and I've worked on legislation. And I'm going to tell you something else at the fear of losing friends. I'm not anti-gun, and I sometimes lean conservative. Now, I say that because I don't hear a lot of people, and I don't lean conservative on everything. Absolutely not. But I feel like this conversation We get so heated. We need, and we do have numbers. What I would like us to see here at the Health Sciences Center is to use everything that we know and all the tools and all the data and to use our titles to help kill this bill. There are numbers. My husband is a psychiatrist. He is the residency director for psychiatry residents at Chestnut Ridge, and he would be here today, but he is in San Diego learning how to take care of his residents. There was a study, a report done back in 2017 that showed among campuses allowing concealed carry, campuses that allow concealed carry, 43% of reported suicides on campus, guess what they came from? They came from a firearm. In campuses that did not have concealed carry, do you think the rate was higher or lower? It was lower. It was actually 13.3%. Now, here's the thing, and again, I'm not anti-gun. I come from a hunting family. I own guns. There is a place for a gun. There is a place not to have a gun. I chaired a committee at the School of Pharmacy where I was responsible for a lot of decisions to be made for remediations, for probations, and expulsions. And over the years, I have had to call campus security 3 times to have them hide in an office next door to me because I was worried that that student had a firearm because they had made threats, whether in person or online. I bring that up because I think emotion is important, but I think those types of professional anecdotes, we saw them carry yesterday. We need to focus. We need to ask questions. We need you to tell us what we can do to help make this bill better. We cannot hang our hats on exemptions. When you hang your hats on exemptions, it's what happened yesterday. The exemptions get taken away, and suddenly we're back to a general bill. So what committees will this bill be assigned to? We don't know yet. I was just online. We need to know. And if you are opposed to this bill, you contact the people on that committee. If it's not assigned to a committee yet, very respectively, my advice, and Rob can say this, would be to very kindly call Senator Carmichael's office and not be emotional and not be angry and not offer threats, but to instead offer insight and advice as to how we as academicians see this and what committees we want to see it go to. As the wife of a psychiatrist and a person who has mental health, family members with mental health challenges, I think it's reasonable to send it to HHR. I may be the only one, but there's a lot of implications from a behavioral health standpoint. Thank you.
Do you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question.
Thank you.
I'd like to say I'm not against people if they want to also just state their opinion here. I think that's good. But my question is similar to the one earlier. What is the school going to do to help this get killed in the Senate as far as supporting faculty, supporting staff? I would like to say I was at the Capitol yesterday. I was at the Capitol on Monday. I have midterm grades due tomorrow. I'm a graduate student. I have my own work. I'm going to get it done, but I think that there's a lot that the university could have done to get more people down at the Capitol yesterday and Monday, because a lot of us are opposed, and we had a good group, but there's so many more than we had there. And I think that things like pushing midterm grades, I think having a day, it was great we had a day off for the polar vortex. I think we can have a day off for this too. I think having students get down there, I think it's very important. But that's my question is, would please consider having more done and making, I would like to read it also, there was a lot of confusion at the Capitol about whether WV was opposed, about things like, I thought it was only 21-year-olds, all this stuff, having more from the top, directed down, helping people organize, helping more people get down there. I'd really, I'm going to be graduated by the time this is going through probably, but would I have chosen WVU 5 years ago if I'd known this, if this had been there then? I painted my room WVU gold freshman year of high school. I've loved my years in undergrad here, loved it in grad school. would I have had the wonderful experience on this campus if this had been in place in 2014? I don't know if I would have chosen here. I might have gone to one of the other schools that's offering the same scholarship. I'm here because I care about this school. I care about my students, care about my colleagues, and I really hope the university does more to fight this.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I have a handful here still from email. So I am going to ask the folks at the mic, do you have a different question that has not yet been addressed by Rob or by Clay?
I have a question.
All right, I'll go to you,
Isn't
please.
there any data about these campuses that shows that campuses that allow guns on campus, does it limit your ability to recruit high-level students? Because I'm director of a PhD program. I've got 13 family members who are alumni from this university. My son's an engineering student here on scholarship. And as a mother, like, I have no confidence you can protect him in the chemistry room with 300 students and guarantee me there's not someone in there with a gun. I'm really concerned about, recruiting high-level students and keeping them here. And the same thing, reconsidering whether my family members should come here.
So your question is there data?
My question is, where's the data on how does this impact your ability to recruit high-level students? Because you're not even going to know if they don't apply. Same thing with the faculty.
So, and I'm not an academic or a scientist, so just bear with me. And it's only been 2 or 3 years in the other states. There will be some students who will not come here as a result of this policy question by the legislature. There'll be some faculty as well. I think that's a given. What I can tell you is, in speaking with our colleagues again in Texas and Georgia, Arkansas, and Kansas, we asked them point blank for that data. Have you seen a drop in enrollment? Have you seen a marked difference in your ability to recruit? And the answer they gave was, well, we know that there's some that have left or there's some that have not been comfortable, but we've been able to recruit and retain students and faculty going forward. As far as a drop in enrollment, one of the institutions, Kansas, saw about a 5% drop, but even they told us that they didn't have proof that it was a result of the campus carry legislation. It was actually a massive tuition increase that year, as well as some other economic and societal data to where they told us themselves, and they didn't, that legislation said everywhere on campus is fair game, no exemptions unless you install a metal detector. They had to go out and spend a lot of money to protect that campus. They were not in favor of what had happened, but they told us, we can't look at you and tell you to where you could rely on it to say we had a huge drop in enrollment as a result of this. And so that's anecdotal. That's not any empirical analysis. It's only been a couple of years since it's passed, but it is something that we, as Clay said, and what we'll have to work on is proving to our colleagues and students who want to come here that we are a safe place.
And a follow-up question, maybe you could find out if those campuses, if the students on those campuses spend an extraordinary amount of time thinking about their safety and thinking about the guns that might be around them instead of thinking about like chemistry, that kind of thing, about the thought processes and psyche of people who might be surrounded by weapons. So that's another thing I'd like to know is, so does my young, precious 19-year-old spend his day thinking, does that person next to me have a gun? Or does he spend his day thinking about chemistry? We need those answers.
Great. Thank you. Do you have a different question that has not yet been addressed?
I do.
Okay.
My name's Vincent. I'm pro-2A, pro-Constitution. I have concealed carry permit from Virginia. And I just want to clarify some things. This bill doesn't say that anyone in the world can just bring a gun on campus. It's those who has a proper concealed carry permit. What does that entail? It means proper training. It also means a proper background check. Those who do not have those two things cannot carry on campus if this bill passes. All right. Another statistic that is widely swept over, concealed carry permit holders are actually less likely to make crime than any other citizen. This is backed by the FBI statistics. Those are the statistics that Barack Obama called the NRA to release, and they did, and that's what they found. All right. Another thing is my question is, okay, if the bill passes, if the bill does not pass. If the bill passes, yeah, I'll conceal carry every single day. All right. And I will feel safe then. If the bill does not pass, I was on the PRT the second week here, and I was going to downtown to get a haircut. And what happens? Someone who was geeked out on drugs stepped onto the PRT, not a student, and I was in there trapped in a little cart by myself without my concealed carry. What are my options there? Run? I can't run. Things moving on the track. All right? So how do I know that you guys will take steps to provide safety and provide all these things that you guys promised against like individuals who have guns on campus who are not. And by the way, if you look at the rules right now, students are not allowed to conceal carry on campus, but anyone else can. Those who are not represented by WVU can. All right? I actually go here. I spend most of my time in West Virginia on this campus, unprotected. I don't see police department. I don't see metal detectors.
So,
Yeah. So a couple things. First, people are not allowed to carry on our campus. So let me answer. What folks will sometimes say is it's not illegal to bring a gun on our campus, and so here's what happens. I'm not a WVU employee. I'm not a WVU student. I'm just a citizen. I set foot on our campus and I have a weapon. If UPD comes up to me and says, you have a weapon, you have to leave, and I leave, then I leave and there's no issues. If I say no, then UPD can call the sheriff on me and I'm guilty of criminal trespass. So it's not accurate to say that if you're not a WVU employee or a WVU student that you can walk onto our campus with a weapon. It is university policy that you can't. There are not criminal penalties attached the first time you walk onto campus. Those don't attach until we tell you to leave. But we do have a policy of no guns on campus, as I indicated previously. As it relates to your other question, and this really applies whether this bill does not pass or whether it passes. And Clay mentioned it. And I know you're on the PRT, and that I understand. Just like there are no guarantees in life on anything, there are some things that I just can't say. Can I prohibit absolutely 100% that someone's not going to get on the PRT and try to do harm, whether you have a weapon or not? I can't. What I can tell you is, as we always talk about with our police and everything we have here, if you see something, say something. If you see something, don't put it on yourself, say something. And we have UPD, we have a number of administrators who help in situations where there's harm. Are we everywhere? No. But do I think our UPD does a pretty good job in keeping our campus safe and maintaining who we are, what we do? I think they do.
I also think it's the strength of the university community that bands together that also makes us safe. So I think that the concept that you bring up is important, as other comments are important too, but it is really on us to make sure each other's safe, as well as having authorities, police department, et cetera, available to help us be safe in particular situations.
all right, to my right, do you have a question?
My question is simple. Is there a reason why the university as a policy is not opposing this bill and rather saying that they want to retain control on campus? So it seems like there's two different statements. The university saying we oppose this bill, and the university saying what they have been saying, which is we prefer to retain control through our Board of Governors. Why is this statement that we oppose the bill not being made and the latter statement being made? What's the reasoning behind that? And what are the pros and cons of stating of either one of those? I'd like to hear that articulated, because I think that we have many of us here who are concerned about this bill. We have a lot of disquiet around that particular distinction. WVU publicly opposes this bill versus WVU says we prefer to retain control. So if you could just articulate the decision process behind that. Thank you.
It's actually a really good question, and thank you for asking it. There quite frankly is a difference there. We want to make it clear that if it were up to our druthers, that we would prefer that this bill not pass. And I know there'll be a lot of folks who may not understand the legislative process. If you watched it last night, maybe you got a little bit of an indication as to that goes. It is a balancing act, given the amount of support with the legislation, of making our thoughts clear as to what we would prefer, but given the support on the legislation, making sure the exemptions are there. And so if we would do if we were to come out and say oppose every day, oppose, I can tell you, because I was told, and it's not my decision, these are legislative leaders who told me this. If you take that stance and when I'll say burn down the house, call for all the pitchforks to come in, we're not going to accommodate a lot of those exemptions that you want. And so what we've said is, we do not support this bill. We would prefer that you leave it alone. We have made the case for the past 3 years that this is not a bill that should pass. And what I can tell you is, from my perspective and from President Gee and from our board and talking to our community, each year the bill, as opposed to getting support, getting weaker. Sometimes if a bill doesn't go, people will get tired and it'll go away. What I can tell you is the support for this legislation has grown stronger each and every time. So we have not given up and said, oh, we've agreed to this and it's fine, it's to move forward. It's the balancing act we've been trying to say of expressing our concerns and saying, we don't want this to pass. The leadership of the legislature have told us, both parties, both sides, this bill's going to pass. So we don't think we can say, we support this bill. We would, from an administration perspective, we would never go there. That's not our preference. We have stated our preference is give us the local control, not only on this issue, but about everything. Charleston getting in our business on just about any issue, they don't understand our researchers. They don't understand our students, our faculty. But that is the balancing act and understanding the lay of the land. I wish that weren't the case, that there were that much passion and support for this bill, but that's what we've tried to articulate. We don't like this, but what would really be terrible is if you didn't allow us the discretion to protect a number of our areas of our campus.
So it's ostensibly been told that if you oppose the bill, there will be legislative consequences and repercussions for publicly opposing the bill. That's what you're saying? That if the university comes out and says we oppose this bill, there will be retaliation at the legislative level for that opposition?
No, I'm not saying that.
So why not come out and say it? I mean, if the bill is going to pass, and you've been told that it's going to pass, why not come out publicly with the opposition? Because if it's going to pass, it's going to pass. But what's important is to take a stance on this. The only thing that I can think of as a reason why the university hasn't is because there will be retaliation for taking that stance. That there's going to be consequences for it, and we're going to get a worse deal for opposing a bill, which doesn't seem very democratic, which doesn't seem very just at all. That we oppose something. I mean, everybody has a right to take a stance, but if there's going to be specific consequences for taking a stance against it, given all the support that's here at the university, I can't understand why we don't take that stance. That's just.
So I was clear. I was not saying that there would be retaliation. I was not suggesting that. The supporters of the bill said, well, if you're just going to outright oppose it, then there's nothing to sit down and talk about. There's nothing for us, and there's no reason for us to sit down and hear your concerns. There's no reason for us to hear that. And as you saw and I'm not defending this. Don't get me wrong. You saw on the floor of the House of Delegates last night, if you watched it, there were 16 amendments. There were some pretty reasonable amendments. And let me just make that clear. The exemptions that were in the bill didn't get stripped out last night. And so I'll just I'm not defending, I'm just sort of explaining. You have a right to know. I think it's a great question. So there's an exemption in the bill that says that there can't be any guns in areas in which there's patient care or mental health services being provided. There was an amendment to that bill, and it's actually part of the Texas rule and something that we think we probably have the authority to do under the exemption right now, which says that it's not only the actual exam room, but it's within 150-foot radius of that actual exam room. So you couldn't carry a gun into the bathroom right down the hallway, or you couldn't carry a gun nearby there. In other words, there's a zone around that area. The supporters of the bill stood up and said, we're not going to support that amendment. And a couple of them said, this sounds reasonable on its face, but you're trying to defeat this bill, so defeat the amendment. And the amendment was defeated, and there were 15 of them that were defeated like that last night. What I'm saying is, if we would have said, we're not even willing to talk about what those sensitive areas are, then they would not have entertained putting those into the bill. I was not suggesting retaliation or anything like that. The other thing I will say is, to me, and this is something I have to weigh, and I completely respect your opinion, if I look at a bill with no exemptions or a bill that protects some of our sensitive areas, and those are my two choices, or there's a very, very remote chance that this thing falls, but the speaker and the president and everybody have told me it's going to run, as evidence of the fact that they tried to kill it yesterday and it came back to life. If the two options we're realistically looking at are a terrible bill with no exemptions, or maybe one or two that would protect, I mean, the football stadium and basketball stadium because of NCAA and wouldn't have protected individual faculty offices and where we have disciplinary hearings versus a bill that has all these exemptions. We have to, as leadership of the university, look at what's the art of the possible between those realistic scenarios. If it was a vote of this campus, I can tell you where it would come down on that. Unfortunately, the policymakers of the state are elected by folks who do that. So it is a balance and understanding the art of the possible that we've spent the past 3 or 4 years listening and talking to campus leadership and thinking through with the legislature. So I want to get to some other questions. Where are we left or right?
Right over here to my left.
Rob and Clay, I'm Alan Harris. I work for facilities. Thank you for coming up here today and giving up your time to discuss this. But first of all, I work with a lot of the guys here in the building, and we're all over facilities, not only in this building, but the Biomed building and the Bernie building. And we're here 24/7 around the clock. I'm not throwing the police under the bus, but half the time there's no police in this building. And if there was someone in here with an AR or an AK, I would rather have 20 of my buddies with their pistol out here with me than nothing. Because if Columbine or Virginia Tech would have had concealed carry permit holders, they might have lost 15. But I would rather lose 15 than 40 or 100. So I urge you guys strongly to help consider this bill and pass this bill. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you. Sean, do you have a question?
Yeah. So I definitely have a question. One comment before it. It seems like a few of the exemptions are kind of just very inconsistent to me in terms of, so like disciplinary hearings and it being exempt there seems to acknowledge that, either that will suppress a frank exchange of thoughts and ideas, or it is a contentious setting which would be made more dangerous by the presence of guns. Both of those clearly apply to every classroom. So it doesn't make any sense that those would be sensitive, but the classroom wouldn't. My questions are, President Gee wasn't really visible in the last week. I'm wondering what the reason behind that sort of approach and strategy was as far as him not coming out in direct opposition visibly on television, because he's our most recognizable figure and the House delegates wouldn't have had that misconception. I wonder if maybe there'll be a different approach now that it's being considered in the Senate. And my second question is, who determines what are adequate safety measures? And you said that those were being discussed after Virginia Tech. Are they being discussed now in terms of what can we do to adequately secure our classrooms so that we can then go back and say, okay, and now you can't have guns in the classroom again?
So really good questions. First, let me say, Dr. Gee has been engaged. And so I don't want you, I know it's not answering your question, but I'll get there. I don't want you to think that our bow tie guy has not been engaged or supporting your interests on our campus moving forward. And he has been in contact and listening and learning and speaking with our legislative leaders on our behalf with them. I've been tasked with communicating and holding these campus conversations as sort of the subject matter expert for that. We'll certainly talk, and I'll talk with Sharon about the need for him to engage directly on campus. But what I want you to know is don't think because I'm here and he's not here that he doesn't care about you or this campus or isn't advocating for the best interest of the campus. And we'll take it back and talk on that point. On your second question, classrooms and administrative buildings were something that we argued for and argued for a lot. One of the things that we heard from supporters of the legislation is if you ban all classrooms, you've essentially undone the intent of the bill, which is allow someone to protect themselves. Because if they can't, I'm not defending this. I'm just saying what they said is if you can't carry it in classrooms, then you've essentially said that no student can carry because they're going to be in a classroom at some point during that day. As to your final question, as it relates to how we talk and think about adequate security measures on our campus, I think there's a whole host of things that we need to consider, and I would encourage you and all of your colleagues to take part in. If this bill passes, which I think the likelihood, given what happened last night, that it will. I'm not saying that it absolutely will. As someone said, if you assume, look what happens, and it's a burden I have to bear in trying to help navigate and make advice on this. If this bill does pass, what you will see, or at least I think, and I can say we're aligned on this, is we're going to have a lot of communication with our campus. We're going to have a lot of opportunity for comment and dialogue so that we can talk about, well, what do we do with our classrooms? What if a faculty member now wants a panic button? What if a faculty member now wants, and we may not have the money or the resources to get it to where we can put metal detectors in every classroom. I'm not saying that's an opportunity, but do we talk about, is there a panic button in a classroom? Or what do we talk about how our UPD monitors and goes around our buildings so that we feel safer? I would encourage you, if this bill passes, because I'm going to be a big part of having those conversations to where we do get to a place where I want you to feel safe here. I want everyone to feel safe here. And that's something that we are committed to moving forward. And I don't know whether it's a task force or it's a series of campus conversations or town halls or breakfast, lunch, dinners. If this passes, we've got 15 months to make you and others feel as comfortable as you can because we want you to stay here. And you do have that commitment from us, from President Gee on down, that we need to have a lot of conversations about what that means and really talking about who we are and Clay's culture of where we're going to go. So that's something we did say, if you're going to pass this, for please sake, give us time so that we can do that, so where we can make sure people feel safe. So it will be part of the ongoing conversation.
Thank you, Rob.
Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Agnes Wojciechowski. I moved here from Louisiana this year. There was similar bill trying to be pushed for Louisiana. It was defeated. And I think the reason for that was the grassroots activists. What I don't see university doing is whenever you're saying contact your legislator, there is no one button where you can write your statement and send it to a legislator. There is nowhere organizational-wise place which would, let's face it, I'm having husband who is a doctor, who is professor. I'm having friends who are professors. They don't really have time and resources to hunt every single legislator to send them email. Why wouldn't we make it easy? We have IT here. That's all I'm asking for. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we do have 3 questions that came in via email that are different from the questions we've had on the floor, so I'm going to address these before we wrap up. The first is, how does this affect foreign students who cannot obtain a concealed carry permit?
So really good question. I mean, the answer is they would not be able to carry for protection on our campus. It sort of highlights one of the things that Sean was talking about in the need to make sure that we take steps where people do feel safe on our campus and working through that. But that is one of the limitations of current laws. You have to get a permit, you have to be either a West Virginia resident, or if you're over 21, be the resident of a state and get a permit in a state that we give reciprocity to. So it's one of those areas we just have to work through.
Okay. Another question that came in is, how would the bill affect Jackson's Mill?
Really good question. One of the exemptions in the legislation says that if there's an event that is that is a K-12 event on campus, and there's a specific definition of, it's being exclusively used or it's leased to or under the control of either a state or a county school board, then we have the ability to exempt that moving forward. And that's the same thing with, we'll have kids who come in for the Creative Arts Center for plays and things like that. What we will have to do as an institution, again, this comes over to that 15 months, is I suspect we're going to get a master agreement really quick with the Mon County School Board and the Lewis County School Board and maybe the State Board of Education, to where when we do have groups for K-12 that are on our campus, that we have either leased or put it under their exclusive control so that we can deem those areas off limits moving forward. And so that's an area that we'll have to work through with the legislation. We did argue for that discretion and autonomy as it relates to K through 12. And so the 4-H events and a number of those opportunities at Jackson's Mill, we believe we would be able to protect. Absent those or some other exemption, since Jackson's Mill is university property, it would be subject to the general rules.
Great, thank you. And the last question I have, there were several that were submitted in a similar vein. What are some protocols that could be put in place to prevent the good guy from being misrepresented in an active shooter situation?
So a couple things. Our UPD are trained to handle a situation that they come into. Beyond that, we will have a number of educational opportunities for when there is an active shooter, just like we currently have, or live fire. We had one a couple of weeks ago with UPD. You know, if I don't want to be crass, I'll be careful here. If there's someone who has a concealed weapon and they think that they are going to use it in a situation where they're going to cause harm, they're taking a risk that when our good guys, not saying they're a bad guy, our good guys, which I mean the guys in badges who know what they're doing in those situations, come in, they're taking the risk that our UPD is going to take control of that situation. Their situation isn't determining who are the good guys with guns versus bad guys with the guns. It's how are they going to protect everybody in this classroom. And if somebody has a gun and they pulled it out, they're taking a risk as it relates to that situation. And so that's why training for those folks is something that they do want to carry a gun and they do want to be able to protect themselves, that we are going to offer, because they need to know that, but they also need to know when not to take that weapon out, and that it's only to be taken out in this situation or that situation. Otherwise, it has no business anyone else knowing that it's even there for that perspective. So they're taking a risk that our UPD, when they try to insert themselves into that type of situation.
I think that it also brings up the issue that as we look at this time to implementation, if it does pass, these are issues that we have to deal with, not just from the University Police Department, but from our campus community, because people should understand what are the ramifications in certain scenarios where you might be involved or you may not be involved. Because generally, to me, the best ingredient is to try to get out of that area as quickly and safely as you can, given the different chaotic issues going on.
Great. Clay, before we wrap up the conversation, are there any sort of last words you'd like to share with the group before we head to the final slide?
No, I think that the comments today have been very powerful, and I mean that sincerely. And I know there's people that sit on all sides of this issue and many issues, but the beauty of a university is the fact that we should be able to be a place where we have conversations where people don't agree, where we create new solutions. And I think that the issue that to me is the most relevant is the one of safety. And we all do best when we feel safe, when we can be authentic, we can be ourselves, we don't have to hide, we don't have to be small. You know, I've said this before, but Google did a study of their best teams, and the only thing that separated their best team's performance for all their other teams was a higher degree of psychological safety on that team. Abraham Maslow did a hierarchy of human needs. Physiology is the bottom layer. You have to breathe, your heart has to beat. But the next layer that we all need is safety. And then love, then self-esteem, then self-actualization. So we are committed that we will work together. We're also members of the university community, and we will work together to make this the best possible place it can be, as we have been working together to do that. And that is irrespective of whether this bill or other bills pass or don't pass. It is all of our responsibilities together to make this a safe place where people feel welcome, where people feel that they can express their opinion. And, you know, depending on what our legislators decide to do, you know, in this state, in this community, in this country, then we are all citizens that have the right to change that by our vote and by our voice. And I would just say that it's important that we continue talking with each other and working together to have the strongest possible community we can have, because that's ultimately the way that we become safe, in my opinion.
Thank you. So just draw attention to the slide. We will continue to have information in e-news, so I encourage you to stay on top of that to find the latest updates there. We also have the document Under the Dome, which is distributed every Monday, that talks about what is happening at the legislature. There is the website, and you can connect to that link through this or through this page here once you go to the website. There's archived versions of this campus conversation, and there are also others that are there at bureaucracybusters.wvu.edu. You can continue to submit questions. We will update the FAQ that you will also find at this site, and we will continue to take those and get those answers to you. So I thank you today for coming and engaging in a lively and important conversation, and stay tuned to e-news to see what progresses next. Thank you.